Let me begin with a question. Look at this footage and tell me, am I shooting instinctively? If you haven't seen me shoot before, you'll probably say yes. There's no aim assist, I'm using a traditional bow, bonus points for shooting thumb draw, I'm shooting fairly quickly, and I'm Asian, so there's probably some mystical bullshit happening. But at the end, I outright say, and I must clarify, not instinctive. But what makes this style of shooting different to the plethora of other archers who say they are shooting instinctively? Is it actually different, or are we talking about the same thing? In this video, I'm going to be talking about the misconceptions around instinctive archery. People are very passionate about instinctive archery, and there can be spot fires of controversy whenever someone pushes instinctive archery onto someone else. And before you cancel me, trad shooters, I'm not here to say that anyone is wrong or that you shouldn't do it. I want to help people better understand what they are doing in archery and to help communicate concepts better. So if you want to do instinctive archery, go for it. I'm here to pose a question. What exactly are you doing? This is outright the most controversial part of instinctive archery, defining what it is. I decided to ask a trusted expert for their definition. ChatGPT actually has a pretty decent definition. Things like no mechanical aids, eye coordination, muscle memory, and body alignment are pretty clear indicators of instinctive shooting. But there's a murky grey area that revolves around the concept of subconscious shooting and what instinctive really means. Before that, let's draw some clear lines by defining what is definitely instinctive and definitely not. Basically, anything that uses aiming assistance like sights or a deliberate measured aiming method like string walking and face walking are not instinctive by definition. You are altering the equipment or the way it is used to function as an aiming tool. On the other hand, we have the most dynamic forms of archery involving movement, either the target and or the shooter. Shooting while moving or shooting at a moving target heavily relies on tracking the target with the eyes and trusting that the hands will move towards what the eyes are focused on. Now, you can try this yourself by pointing at specific spots while moving. As long as you keep your eyes on the spot, you will maintain your point. Once you look away, you lose all sense of position. Pointing is an instinctive action. Now here's where I present my controversial opinion. Archery is not instinctive. Wait, don't unsub. Let's make this clear. If you've heard the debate between instinctive versus intuitive, you'll know where I'm going. Let me explain. Instinctive archery is very often described in the same vein as throwing a ball, or in this case, I'm throwing an arrow. Our eyes lock onto what we want to throw at. We can sense how hard we throw by how much it weighs in our hand. Without thinking, we adjust the strength we put into the throw. Our hips rotate for more power, our weight shifts with our feet, our offhand swings out as a counterbalance, and our arm follows through with the action. This is an innate skill. We don't have to be taught how to throw, we can physically do it. We can do this by feel because our ancestors evolved to use our natural environment. Bows, however, are not natural. We didn't evolve to use bows, we created and adapted them to suit what our bodies can do. You can certainly align and track a target instinctively with a bow and arrow, but everything to do with shooting is a taught skill. Everything from the bow grip to the hook to the release are high level skills that must be trained. Otherwise, anyone should be able to pick up a bow, instinctively hit the target. But anyone who has taught a class knows that the average person doesn't know how to hold a bow, let alone shoot one. But let's say that we have acquired that skill and our shot execution is at the level of muscle memory, the level where it does feel like second nature. Is it instinctive then? and I would argue that it is, to a certain extent. That extent is as far as the arrow flies dead straight. The brain works on pattern recognition. As part of our evolutionary survival mechanisms, we've become very good at lining things up, putting circles in circles, pointing lines towards points. The most instinctive way to aim and shoot is to align along the eye and point it right at the target. But arrows don't fly straight. At some point, they will begin to arc and drop. How do you know where to align now? This is where archery stops being instinctive and starts being intuitive. Let's go back to throwing. We can adjust how far we throw by how high or how hard we throw using judgment and feel. We can't actually do this with a bow because we have no contact with the projectile. It's one thing to throw an arrow, but using a tool to launch the arrow means that I don't feel where the arrow will go. I can feel how much tension there is in the bow, but this doesn't translate to feeling where the arrow will go. You can't feel that you have to lift the bow that bit higher. You're not running a complex calculation in your head. So how do you adjust? By using knowledge. Our brain is capable of learning very quickly. Our marksmanship is attained through experimenting and experience. We don't feel where the arrow will go. We know after trying it and seeing patterns. If a target is placed at an unfamiliar distance, we don't instinctively know where to aim. We have to learn from mistakes, apply what we've learned previously. If I pick up an unfamiliar bow, I can't feel where the shot will go. I have to guess based on prior experience and adjust. The capacity for our brains to process new information is beyond calculation. This is not instinct. Instinct is primal. This is intuition. We are able to figure it out. And that leads us to the apex of the instinctive shooting dilemma. Our brains are consistently trying to build an understanding of the things around us. We are constantly processing information. We are saving these snapshots between every shot, so we are not starting over and guessing each time. Our innate desire to find patterns means that inevitably we are going to imprint what we are looking at, our sight picture. When I started archery, I was under the impression that instinctive archery meant don't aim. Feel the shot, trust the shot, just look at the target, just like historical archers did in the past. But when you look through tutorials in instinctive archery, they identify a common concept.
Everybody knows it. Aim small, miss small.
Acquire the verification that my arrow is good right and left, and that the up and down appears to be where I know it needs to be to hit that spot. In this case,
I'm getting my aim is set. Now once I set my aim, which is the top edge of my broadhead on that target, I don't really have to think about it anymore.
Everyone aims. Whether they say so explicitly or not, everybody aims in instinctive archery. Everyone focuses on the target. Everyone has reference points. Everyone actively switches their conscious thought away from the target and onto form and shot execution. And in many cases, their shot style is very conducive to automatically putting the arrow on the target. They shoot at short distances under 30 meters, or they may use a 3-under technique that brings the arrow closer to the eye. It's a switch from aim to anchor to alignment, then 100% of the focus is on shot execution. That's pretty much what I do. This is what I mean by aim small, miss small. Instead of aiming for somewhere on gold, I'm picking a very specific spot to line up my shaft. It's here somewhere. It might be a little too low, although they're kind of drifting high. I might just go above here next time. So I'm calling it, I'm gonna put slightly above the bottom of this gold disc. And it is. When I started writing this video, I was on a mission to debunk instinctive shooting. I was under the impression that instinctive meant empty mind and no aiming, or that instinctive shooters are really just gap shooting and shooting without paying attention. But it turns out that instinctive shooters pay a lot of attention because they share the same singular goal of archery, to hit the target. Modern target shooters focus on form and sight picture too, just different equipment. Modern barebow shooters focus on putting the arrow point on target too. There are far more similarities than differences across the styles that call themselves instinctive and those who don't. So what exactly is the problem? It's the thing that we're told to brush aside. The word.
Alright, instinctive shooting. Alright, don't worry about the word. Don't focus on the word. I know people, there's no such thing. Whatever.
It isn't that the word is wrong. The methods of sighting and aligning do use the instincts ingrained in our brain. Eye coordination, visual proprioception, pattern recognition, and so on. The more dynamic forms of shooting rely much more on these instincts, while modern target shooting uses a smaller set of passive skills, but still depend on them. The term instinctive archery best describes a tradition, not a method. The style pioneered by Howard Hill and Fred Bear, a style that contrasts with the advancement in modern target archery equipment. But archers in this generation didn't grow up reading Howard Hill. Their exposure to non-modern archery is through pop culture and social media, where names like Lars Anderson and Hawkeye are more well known, and with that comes pop history and fallacies like historical archers not aiming. I think we can all agree that the mindlessness of archery, the lack of focus, is the antithesis of instinctive archery and archery in general. Developing form and consistency takes months and years, but new archers give up in weeks. Rather than widening our community and understanding, we become more insular and segregated. And that's where the final problem comes in: elitism. There's an unfortunate byproduct of the fragmented archery community that goes hand in hand with tribalism. Most archers only do one style of archery. The result is often a disconnect between disciplines. Someone who's only shot modern target bows might look down on traditional bows as inconsistent and inaccurate. Someone who has never shot modern recurve might think that it's a cheat tool. But what adds to the imbalance is the romanticism behind traditional archery, and, by extension, the prestige of the instinctive label. Any person in mainstream culture knows what a traditional bow is, so every time an Olympics happens, these modern bows are derided and YouTube comments are flooded with demands to go back to the old days with longbows to show true skill. This builds a trad shooter complex that carries a shared disdain for anything modern, even though we are doing the same thing. I've been very fortunate in being able to cross through the disciplines, except compound. I have had opportunities to learn from the best coaches, instructors, mentors, teachers of both modern and traditional archery styles. Each time we sat down or got into a call, we found far more in common between the styles. Learning Olympic recurve gave me the foundation for traditional. Learning traditional made me better at coaching Olympic recurve. So much of the language and principles I teach apply to any archery style. There isn't a problem with instinctive archery itself. The problem is that it isn't necessarily what we think it is. It isn't an easier form of archery. It isn't purer or more historical or better. It is a mindset that comes with a specific methodology, but one that isn't exclusive. As Kramer Ammon said,
comes to archery shooting methods. I like to shoot aerial targets, rolling targets, trick shots, and then I also like to get really serious occasionally and try to get as precise as possible. When I'm doing more active shooting, snap shooting, I'm always instinctive, but I can switch just like that back to gap when I'm really trying to dial it in.
perhaps our biggest problem in archery as a whole is that we focus too much on what is different and not on what brings us together. Perhaps that is the target we should be aiming for. I'm going to end this by giving a shout out to the archery community at large. This was a solo project, no one else was involved, this is purely my opinion, but I do have to acknowledge that there are so many people out there who teach and share their passion for archery. People who are doing it for far longer than me, with far more experience and far more success. And look, I'm not a pioneer of archery on the internet. There have been so many people who've done this before me. I've taken bits and pieces, a bit of wisdom from the other channels, which I've linked in the description. If you haven't already watched them, follow them, have a look. It's really important to embrace and enhance our perspective of archery. I don't think there's enough collaboration in the archery community. I think we stick too much to what we're comfortable with, and as a result we can often dig ourselves into these big pits and trenches and not really understand those connections, which for the times which I've had those opportunities, again, have been really enlightening, because I've sat down with people and said, hey, this is the same thing, this is amazing. So whatever the case, whatever style of archery you do, I do hope that you find yourself enjoying it, you find that happiness, and you find yourself motivated to take whatever path archery takes you on.